So in a moment, I'll have a Varro image for you to look at. We'll look at two paintings today. Now in the book, we sift into the symbolism in more than 36 Varro paintings. And we also look intimately at Varro's personal life, including traumas related to 2 wars and her long friendship with Leonora Carrington. Our hope today is to calibrate you as readers, artists, and scholars to the aim of the book, which was to decode the messages Varro and Carrington painted into their works, not only for the experience of numinous contact with archetypal forces and for personal growth, but also to address cultural complexes related to misogyny and patriarchy. And Rula, if you would put up the first of those 2 images now, thank you.
All right, so can you see them? Can you
not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
It says it started screen sharing. The images just haven't
There it
shown up
is.
yet.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
There we go.
I see it now. Yeah.
So Varro learned to sew as a girl in Spain. Sewing and weaving are recurrent themes in her paintings. This painting is one of Varro's more recognizable and well-known images. She called the piece Bordando el manto terrestre. In the West, we know the painting as embroidering the earth's mantle. The painting is the central panel in a triptych, a series of 3 works that the artist painted in 1961. Now, there's a lot going on in this painting, nothing short, in fact, of the creation of a new world. Notice briefly the alchemist in the tower, a hooded figure stirring a broth bubbling in a cauldron. From a Jungian perspective, Varro may have been imaging here the alchemical dissolution of complexes at work in her psyche, but also, given that the young women are weaving the garment of a new world, the softening of cultural complexes related to male domination of women and the feminine. Following Varro, our book, I'm the writer and Rebecca, by the way, is the editor. The book is written as a prose garment, threads coming in and going out. And one of the central threads of the piece is a dream Varro recorded in her diary, a dream of an encounter with death. From a Jungian perspective, Varro's dream of the executioner coming toward the end of her life symbolized the culmination of her project to unmake patriarchy. Weaving her life's ending into an egg, she transforms fear of death and the executioner's fear of the feminine into love, partnership, and renewal. In a moment, I'll share Varro's dream. To begin weaving the dream with a Varro painting called The Encounter, we turn to Jung, who wrote that individuation does not shut one out from the world, but gathers the world to itself. Our research monograph grew from the ways in which Varro gathered the uncured wool of the world to herself, weaving from it a painted tapestry of love and transformation. My ability to notice what Varro was doing is due to my association with my wife, Rebecca, a gifted editor who restitched unwieldy threads of research into a cohesive form and in-depth psychological acts of midwifery, cooked the essence and meaning of Varro's work into an imaginal broth that nourishes our understanding of how the alchemical practice of painting helped the artist heal from trauma and protest problems associated with patriarchy. Shortly, Rebecca will amplify the connection between Varro's painting, The Encounter, and the artist's dream of the executioner. First, let's engage with the imagery in the dream. Varro recorded 10 dreams in her diary. The dreams are undated. She titled the last entry in the series simply Dream 10. Here in Varro's words is the text of the dream. I had discovered an extremely important secret. something like a part of the absolute truth. I don't know how, but powerful people and government authorities had found out that I possessed that secret and considered it extremely dangerous for society, since if it were known by everyone, the entire existing social structure would collapse. So they took me prisoner and condemned me to death. The executioner took me to a place that seemed like the wall of a city. From either side of the wall, an earthen slope dropped very steeply. The executioner seemed very pleased. I felt great fear and great distress. When I saw he was already preparing to behead me, I started to cry and pleaded with him not to kill me. It was still too soon to die, and he should consider that I still had many years of life ahead of me. Then the executioner started to laugh and to mock me. He said, "Why are you afraid of death if you know so much? Having so much wisdom, you shouldn't fear death." Then I realized suddenly that what he was saying was true, and that my horror wasn't so much of death, but instead because I'd forgotten to do something of the greatest importance before dying. I begged him to give me just a few more moments of life so that I could do something that would allow me to die in peace. I explained that I loved someone and needed to weave his fates with mine, since once this weaving was done, we would stay united for eternity. The executioner seemed to find my entreaty very reasonable and granted me some 10 more minutes of life. So then I acted fast and wove around myself, much as baskets and hampers are woven, a sort of cage in the shape of an enormous egg, 4 or 5 times larger than me. The material I used to weave it was like ribbons that kept materializing in my hands, and which, without seeing where they came from, I knew were his substance and my own. When I finished weaving that egg-like object, I felt at peace, but I kept on crying. Then I told the executioner that he could kill me at once, because the man I desired was woven with me for all eternity. In the book, we explore the way Varro's paintings produce profound personal growth, a process of individuation that culminates in the transformation symbolized in the dream of the executioner, and artistic works that reimagine a world that can now embrace the presence and power of women and the feminine. In the book, we sift into the symbolism of each of the symbols in Varro's dream. Here, one of these symbols, the egg, is related to an important Varro work, the encounter. For insights into this painting, I'd like to introduce my wife, Rebecca, who edited the book.
Hello, and can you show the other image? Oh, am I muted?
Yep,
Oh.
There we go.
Here it is. This image.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and am I muted? I can't see on my.
No, we can hear you. Yeah.
So the egg that Varro wove in her dream is essentially her womb. And interestingly, that egg comes from her womb. So it is a womb she inhabits that is born from her womb. From a Jungian perspective, the symbolism of the egg carries within it the dangerous secret that frees us from fear and the grip of the patriarchy. For the egg emerges from the womb of the feminine. In one of Varro's last works, The Encounter, a vinyl painted on Bristol board in 1962, the artist paints herself as a tall figure cloaked completely in silver and blue. She comes from the dark wood of the unconscious with the knowledge that there is a secret held in her womb, a secret that has been silenced. In the painting, the woman opens a door. Inside a dark room on the other side of the door is an owl with human hands and legs who peers out at her. The owl, in connection to the egg, the womb, and the silencing of the secret, brings us to the story of the goddess Athena as a mythological narrative unfolding in Varro's art and life. In older goddess-worshiping cultures, before the birth of Athena and patriarchy, the owl's powers of death were understood as transformative, part of what archaeologist Marija Gimbutas called the perpetual functioning of the cycle of life, death, and regeneration, embodied by a central feminine force, the goddess. In Greek mythology and in today's cultural context, however, the owl's stunning power of death is subsumed by the interests of the patriarchy's will to power. Thus, the owl's spiritual and magical associations with the archetypal feminine, with night, and with the lunar psyche have given way to narrow typecasting in which the owl is most often linked with Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and war. Psychologically and culturally, Athena is a representation of a daughter of the patriarchy. This unofficial status is confirmed in Athena's unusual birth from the head of her father, Zeus, who, fearing that a son would overthrow him, swallowed Metis, his pregnant consort. In an act of domination and dismissal of the feminine by Zeus, Athena, as unborn daughter, was gestated and born from the god's forehead. Her connection to the mother, the feminine, the womb, and thus the pre-patriarchal province of the owl severed. Like Athena, Varro was a father's daughter. Her paintings feature the meticulous and intricate brush strokes she honed as a girl while executing mechanical drawings for her father, a hydraulic engineer. In the play Hamlet, as daughter, sister, and potential wife, the character Ophelia captured what the psychological dynamics of patriarchy are like for girls with owlish inner natures. They say the owl was a baker's daughter, Lord. We know what we are, but know not what we may be. Marion Woodman said of Ophelia that she is like a walking owl, bewitched by her unconscious feminine, her father, and we might add, the patriarchy. Woodman added, she never finds her own voice, she never finds her own body or her own feelings, and therefore misses life and love in the here and now. In this painting, we see Varro finding that voice, but covering it with her hand. In the encounter, we meet her, a daughter of the patriarchy, with subordination to the authority of the father as her alchemical first matter. It is 1959. Varro has 4 years left to live. In this painting, Varro makes one of her stronger and more overt symbolic statements about what it is like to be a woman in a patriarchy. The story in the painting unfolds like this. A woman has walked out of the dark woods of the unconscious to stand before a door. She stands cloaked in a delicate silver and blue flowing robe with a face peering out from her womb. With her left hand, the woman cradles the face, her own face, her fingers cupped tightly over the mouth. With her right hand, she opens the door. Standing on the other side of the door, inside a dark room or closet, is a creature with human legs, but the upper body and face of an owl. What message is Varro sending about patriarchy through her image? In the encounter, the colors, silver and blue, Varro chose for the garment worn by the woman facing the owl figure at the door are crucial to decoding the metaphoric message the artist is sending with the imagery. Color, Philip Ball wrote, underpins the alchemical belief in transmutation. A substance's color was deemed an outward manifestation of its inner properties. What do the colors of the cloak of the woman emerging from the forest reveal about the processes of transformation at work in Varro's life? From a Jungian perspective, we see from the silver and blue of her garment that the soul of the woman is bluing, having entered the realm of imagination, and at the same time is also silvering. Alchemically speaking, the imagination of the whitened soul has been enriched by the tarnish of time and experience, seasoned by suffering in its silvering. Now, having found the silver light of her lunar nature, the woman knows the secret held in her womb, the female truth about patriarchy, that she has had to silence her hand over the mouth of the self she carries within her. Having come from the dark woods of the unconscious depicted in the background of the painting, the woman holds her truth within her and can travel beyond the parameters of patriarchal oppression to reclaim her voice. As Woodman, who did pioneering work to revalue the feminine from a Jungian perspective, believed, only by discovering and loving the goddess lost within her own rejected body can a woman hear her own authentic voice. And we might add, in so doing, redeem the owl and its wisdom and relationship with death from being subsumed by the patriarchy and by the warlike violence inflicted upon women by misogyny and hierarchies that demand the inferiority of females and the feminine. In the encounter, the owl at the door of Varro's consciousness is no longer little, but stands tall on long human legs, asking to be let out of the room that limits her movement into life. Remembering that the psychological purpose of a metaphor is to constellate emotion that has remained unconscious, what do we feel in the presence of the woman and the owl? The feeling of the image is ambivalent. There is a sweetness of a reunion and the hope of redemption. But the meeting also brings sadness and the reminder of a shameful psychological crime, a woman's voice, the song of her soul, silenced by patriarchy. For Varro, the encounter marks the artist's transit into what Winnicott designated as the transitional space, which is midway between fantasy and reality and is the domain from which art and culture spring. Here in symbolic space, Varro, as an ego surrendered into service to the designs of the emerging self, is free to build a bridge between a woman's confinement and patriarchal conformity and her release into a place of freedom where she can once again hear and act upon the sound of her own voice. From a Jungian perspective, the painting comes alive as a living metaphor that carries the pain of the patriarchal past, but also the symbolic seed or egg of future change. It seems from our look at the dream of the executioner and the imagery in the encounter that Varro did what Woodman believed a woman must do, let the goddess in, succeeding in the process of reclaiming her emissary, the owl, from the suffocating grip of the patriarchy. In doing so, Varro liberated herself from the fear of death and the silencing of feminine wisdom. In the dream of the executioner, Varro gives voice to what has been hidden in her womb's relationship with the cycles of death and birth, weaving around her the egg and giving herself to the regenerative nature of death, life, and love. As we have also seen in her last painting, Still Life Reviving, Varro gave form to the archetypal or cosmic nature of her insight. We don't show that image here, but it is an image of a bowl of fruit in which the fruit is rising and spiraling up into the life, showing the eternal cycle of becoming.
Wow,
Thank you.
that was a marvelous talk. Thank you so much for sharing, Rebecca and Dennis. Do you mind sharing the book title or the link in the chat box area, or if you have a copy of the book, you may also want to show that as well. That was superb, really.
Thank you. I've put the name of the book in the chat. I'll also put the two names of the paintings.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Right, and then, oh, here they are, okay. All right, and then we'll have some time, hopefully towards the end of the session, to address the comments and the questions that are in the chat box. So if you have anything that you would like to ask the presenters, please feel free to type it in. Okay, so Carole, you're next.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dennis and Rebecca. I'm very amazed at your presentation because I was having difficulty choosing a poem to read. I selected 5, and your topic really dovetails with the poem that I am going to read. And then down the road, I'd like to read one about the Pearl Roundabout that I also would like to share with this group down the road, and another one after Ophelia. Anyway, so some kind of synchronicity going on. I'll just share that this is an epistolary poem, and it came about, I was in the PhD in English program at Claremont Graduate University, and in a semester when I was delving deeply into Emily Dickinson's work, for our final project, we were to do a creative response to Emily Dickinson's work. And I used iambic pentameter, and it really got under my skin, and this tumbled out. And it just almost came out in one fell swoop, and I think it's because of the meter of iambic pentameter. So it's called, and it's very long, so it might hedge into the full 10 minutes. My Emily, a letter. My dearest Emily, it's been too long. I've been thinking of you today and send my heartfelt apologies for not writing to you sooner than this, and for not letting you know what I remember, how much I remember. I do remember our girlhood, it's safe to finally say. So when I imagined myself dipping my pen into the blue glass ink decanter on my humble desk today, I let it drip and drip, so this letter and my little poem clinging here might be given as a small notion of my thoughts of you today, my Emily. You never shunned what hung midair, the strangest bloom suspended like a scar. It's fair to say, or maybe even that of evening star. While in your room you smelled the wood and watched the sky, your way was round, the place a hood. You lingered there to breathe. The dappled air entranced with dawn as much as dark midnight. This corner like a tunnel where you bore through rock, the rock of ages cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee, stained with markings dark and deep, all the while sustained by something like a melting music, dripping from a low-hanging cloud. Of dew you wrote when quiet fell and you could listen far and wide, or too close beyond this veil of words. We laced back then and now together in the dark. We stitch, then plow and plant the glowing blank with deep dark red. A certain heat to burn with questions, to kneel there, turn round, then settle in this spot. Dear Emily, my girlhood friend next door, I knew you always held a secret place up close and in your heart where we could meet again. I've known this place myself when small, this tangled garden where we once played and sweat, our dollies caked with dirt, still pretty to our eyes, and later in our room folding threadbare dresses. In hushed silence, even though the rooms beyond the door were often crowded with the many urgencies of day that could not alter or fix our play, the secret wandering, blind sometimes, but listening hard, howling at the moon sometimes, swelling with scents of honey, anise, cream, and baskets filled with gingered cakes, trays of flowers and poems, the room all lit with strange sparks, or drenched in sadness, which dwelled there too, hard laments, closed yet scented with blue hyacinth, still wet after a sudden summer rain. When seasons snatched us up, though we did not cry, instead we scratched like hunger at a gate. You taught me how to hunt. Too late is too much for you as well. The two of us held on as I do now, remembering while some cruel owner and his entourage burst in from somewhere uninvited. The intruding crowd is always noisy and making rude remarks, while we sit still now, as then, quiet at the desk. Then as the windows grow ice cold with frost and finally put on white, in spite of late summer thunders, so that when winters come again, we will huddle from the cold here, hanging on, bereaved, sometimes bereft, but warming to the work. Emily, sweet Emily, you taught me how to sew. With thimble ready, I steady myself here as you advised to stay the tumult like a wave with tossing wants to wreck this our room. It was because when you left me still within your dream, until it seemed our sisterhood was claimed, charmed and just in time. The clamor then subsided as we applied our craft to striking clear through wasted hours, arriving finally here instead, as slow as anything can be, a greenish seed deep pressed, to grow where even the recess is hard and small, but music must escape, the jailed province that some like us inherit on the wind. Remember how the grasses swayed in autumn wind and all the small things that die along the way, with every season spent undone, too high to reach, we sometimes starved. You showed me how to find the hut, to shut the door and listen as the clock unstruck wound down. Some painful hours, oh yes, there were, and now these hours of affliction, cadenced in between these idle moments, begging for release. You teased me too, like now, your tongue a better instrument than mine. The waning place is always here, you told me so, whispering against my cheek that all must fade, when what there hangs undone will wilt and dip as birds do as they fall away from sky to meet the graveled ground and smash soft feathers in a fist, closed as if to time, to all that is. Closed, you said, would one day open in its own time. This meager dish was all we had, but sharing made the table strong enough to hold our hands, our palms, and what there was that could be touched, what felt our skins in darkness, what gave us this to make again. You taught me how, and so as I call your name today, I sway inside with melody, the music in your name. Emily, dear Emily, you taught me how to listen to rough sounds beyond the wall. You who took me with her when I called so that I no longer felt alone. You spun as I watched a fragile lace of black entwined to trace this of all, forgotten places where something once burned with hollow mocking sounds, then broke into a song again, and yes, again, the music held us as we took each other's hands as small girls do when they turn and go and go and go away while smiling. The distance between the then and now is long, you say. Well, yes, it is. And would you like to stay? If not, I'll carry on, my cargo packed, the sea all ready with that wet forever that calls and calls the smallest things to blossom or to crawl. We spent our childhood there, it's fair to say, the mean digested golden, divested now of fairness, refusing the refusal like a slow fuse. And so our room, this room is now empty, but we know that it is there. Here suspended for our lingering glance back to where it snowed and where something loosened in the wind, the warm and flowing afternoons, waiting just for this return, the churn already and well fed. There is an unmade bed here too. I made it so, did I say? A messy place to take a nap and dream again, so easy after shades are drawn. I will write again, I promise, but for now I must bid you once again farewell. Farewell, farewell, the well is ready too. My cup, oh, my cup has overturned to spill this draught of memory. A wind now fills the sails, tight and holding firm. Remember this while I take my leave of our remembered island, the garden that we shared. See the yellow petals over there, the bright green stem? This distance, oh dome of sky to shelter us, stay, then go. Please forgive the awkwardness of my verse, my mixing of metaphors and such. I haven't written a letter in a very long time and certainly have never written a poem like this, or quite as long as this one. You are surely my most treasured muse, dear Emily. I hope you will remember my telling you that I had a disdain for most frivolous amusements because they lead so suddenly and so readily to a kind of anguish. If this belated correspondence has amused you, I hope not too much, and I hope it tempers any pain you have felt in my absence. To be sure, it has tempered some of mine, poetic anodyne. Affectionately, Caroline. So that's it.
Thank you. Carole, that was very touching, very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now this moves us to Sarah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. There's just a small presentation that I wanted to include with my writing. Okay. So this is just some musings that I've been having recently, an active imagination that I did with an image from a dream. Have you ever had a dream that you just can't shake? I've had quite a few over the years, usually with some sort of numinous or frightening undertones. Swimming in an underground culvert with an iridescent water monster, being shot with BBs and realizing how black blood appears in the dark night under a full moon. Waking breathless and sobbing at the return of a loved one long past. Moments of awe and wonder, or terror and grief. These are just a few of the numinous nightly wanderings that float to the top of my consciousness year after year, rising up to offer new and newly relevant wisdom as my life whirls upon the surface. Then they sink below again, waiting. I'm sure you've had a few that bubble up for you as well, beautiful and awe-inspiring, or heartbreaking and terrible. Nevertheless, the dream that keeps breaking the surface of my consciousness since the first of this month is nothing that I would classify in any of these categories. The only word for it is green. I just got a tattoo of the word green, but it's written in a strange font or language that is mostly recognizable, but there's a lot of flourish and extra symbols within each letter. It reminds me of those coexist bumper stickers, but none of the symbols are religious, at least not ones I recognize. It's on my right forearm near the bend of my elbow, where one would have blood taken. I'm showing it to someone when I realize there's a large piece of concrete nearby that's broken off a building. The break reveals graffiti on the stone underneath. It's from many, many years ago, long before I was born. It's the same symbol that I just had tattooed. When I woke from this dream, this idea of green wouldn't leave me. I was part of a writing group at the time, and I brought it with me that week as a prompt. However, the night of this is all I ended up with in my notebook. This green was content to remain elusive, clinging to the image, but still mysterious and unformed. One of the most gifted dream workers I've ever had the fortune of getting to know, the late Jeremy Taylor, had a term for these dream images, the ones you just can't quite put into words or bring into conversation. He would say that these are not yet speech ripe, and so was the case with green for me. So I went about my day, my week, my month, and now several years, where this green has come to mind, but never found an outlet. It was stubbornly underripe. Honestly, what did I expect from green? Bananas, tomatoes, many other fruits and vegetables show they are not ready for picking or eating when they're still green. In much the same way, this image of green needed to develop into its fullness. So here comes green again. On April 1st, I looked out our kitchen window into the beautiful patch of wild nature we have growing freely as our backyard in our overly manicured neighborhood. Not surprisingly, it's always full of a variety of birds and wildlife. Right now, the plants are returning from their winter sleep. All the trees and bushes and weeds have been popping in vibrant greens, so many shades of green. I began to think, what is it about green? And suddenly this old friend of a dream floated by. I'm not sure if it's ripe enough. However, since this is the first time it's opened itself to further conversation, it feels as if something is shifting in our relationship. Green for me is becoming speech ripe. Green branded me with its mark, so it's never been far, even when it's gone silent. If I roll up my dream sleeve and offer it lifeblood, perhaps we will be able to find fertile ground to grow together. So I went to my dream journal to find the original entry. I figured the best place to start was the first account. And wouldn't you know, I woke with my dream on April 1st, 2017, exactly 4 years before it circulated through my mind again. Green has an affinity for April Fool's Day. It seems they're quite the trickster. I have to say I'm not surprised to encounter this quality of green. As soon as the realization of this date flitted through my mind, galloping boisterously alongside was the Green Knight, or the Knight of the Green Chapel from the King Arthur tales. The Green Knight who bursts into King Arthur's court and immediately calls for blood to be drawn in jest. Gawain takes up the challenge and chops off the head of the knight, knowing in a year he must venture to the woods to face a similar fate. Year after year, my dream called to me from these woods, silent, without thought or word. This green had also lost its head. Yet the promise we made was written on my body and in stone centuries before. Now is the time to face the deep green woods, face the axe and the trickster who wields it. I have often wondered about green in our modern world. Green is related to money and capitalism, but also to the environmental movement. What a tension of opposites. In ecology, green is not only a sign of new growth, but can also represent decay. Green is at once birth and death, old and new, greed and altruism. Green tells us when to go. However, if we're moving too fast, spinning in circles, or rocking the boat, we get green in the gills, and green tells us it's time to stop. Green is the trickster at every turn. I've heard it say that the human eye can see more shades of green than any other color. As I step into the murky depths of this medieval forest, I hope that this is true. This Green Knight, given gifts of transformation and magic by Morgan Le Fay, or Morgan the Goddess as the tale crowns her, could be standing right next to me or miles away, and in truth, he is both. When Gawain is thrice tested, he fails only once. Lucky for him, as with my dream tattoo, his encounter with green drew blood, but it did not drain life. It brought him close to death. It made him see his own mortality, with death before him and vibrant shades of green. Green is most often associated with newness, rebirth, growth, and other positive aspects. It's full of life and endless potential. In this tale, a more deadly aspect of green is depicted, a green of strife and sadness, of challenges and life-changing choice, a green more akin to the sickly green of a poison vial or the suffocating green of an overwhelming algae bloom. These greens are fed by pomp and pride, by an unconscious fertilization, the reiteration of the false promise of endless growth, and by an envious quest for power. Today, the green of the almighty dollar seems to hold the most sway. The green dream of a Green New Deal of just environmental policy, activism, and the like, and the green dollar of big industry, big polluters, fossil fuel capital, battle endlessly. The green recycling arrow spins us around and around, reminding us we each have a role to play, that the die has been cast, that we must walk, lonely and scared, into the confusing landscape of moneyed interest, each individual bearing the load of their carbon footprint, while the corporations and industries continue forward, unabated, as unkillable as the Green Knight, who chuckles as he mounts his steed and carries his head away under his arm. But perhaps the cruelest and kindest trick of the knight is to make Gawain realize his imperfection. Day after day, the knight and Gawain share their daily conquests. It is a part of their compact. On the last day, Gawain, on top of his usual gift of a kiss from the mistress of the house, he is also given a belt to protect him from the blow of the axe. At their ritual exchange, Gawain gives the knight his kiss, but does not reveal his other boon. Knowing he is to face the axe in the morning, Gawain does not want to risk the loss of this protection. In the end, of course, it has all been a ruse arranged by the knight. It is as if he gifted it himself. So on the day of the test of bravery, he nicks Gawain with the axe, but delivers the deepest blow in revealing that he knows the truth of the belt and his accompanying cowardice. The truth that we need revealed in these vibrant shades of green comes after we each realize that we are imperfect in our protection of the earth. We will not recycle every plastic container, reuse every bottle or bag. We may not change our light bulbs for more efficient models, or get an electric car or go vegan. We will do only what we are able, but we must confront the problem, acknowledge the impending crisis. That is our true quest today. Gawain completed his task by going into the woods. He had no idea what he would find there, and he fully expected to die. We also have to face this uncertain future, grieve what has to die in us, sacrifice a vision we may have had in order to see the future that lies ahead. We believe these small rituals of sacrifice, recycling, eating less meat, whatever we choose, are the belt of our protection, but it has to be deeper, wider. We have to receive the cut of the axe, bleed for the cause in a metaphorical sense, tattoo our intention on our arm to be able to find our way back to the collective. Once we have received the wounding, faced the giant, and recognized its power, we know we cannot go forward alone. When facing climate crisis, individual rituals are important to keep us connected to the issue and to each other. A reusable bag or a water bottle can serve as a totem to connect each of us to the larger issue. Every time you make a conscious green choice, let it serve as a touchstone, but do not let that be the end. To move forward, we have to recognize our own personal failings, and even more importantly, in that imperfection, shine a light on society at large, on the industries and policies that got us here. In his imperfection, Gawain must now face King Arthur's court. He survived to make his return and knows he must tell his tale of bravery and cowardice. The court, in turn, wears green belts in solidarity, each knowing that they, in their cowardice, did not take up the challenge to begin with. So how could they fault him for wavering in the face of certain doom in that deep green thicket? So is that enough on green? Is green ripening for you? Is it able to find a voice of its own in your psyche and in our world today? From the green of death comes the green of rebirth. As each of us confront the truth of climate crisis, we call to the larger community. We must recognize that we all fall short, and in that failure, find solidarity, humanity, and hope. This world of ours is one of war and wreck and wonder, and bliss by turns with blunder. We have to face all that has gone wrong to get us to this point in time. The choices that were made and continue to prevail in our flawed policy. The elevation of the green of capital over the green of the natural world. The scapegoating of individuals to deflect from the responsibility of these larger systems and industries. Once we are able to confront and wade through this murky, stifling, stagnant green of death and despair, our eyes will begin to adjust. In a new light of communal purpose, wearing our green belts with pride, we can begin to see the green of change and renewal, a rebirth of a new way forward. The green path ahead will still have challenges, but we will not walk it alone. In our imperfection, we can step forward with confidence, knowing that green contains multitudes, and only by seeing our mistakes, dying to the ways that no longer serve, wearing our imperfection with pride, can we be an example of the change needed in the world today.
Wow, thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. A very powerful message from your dream. Thanks for sharing it with us, from your psyche to ours. Thank you. Susanna, I don't think she made it. I can't see Susanna here in the name list. So we will move to Omar.
Hi. just going to try and share screen. I've got a few poems I'd like to read.
Mhm.
Where are they? They should be there. Good. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there's a few poems just from potentially from my next collection in early 2022. They're actually not poems about my daughter, where the whole book's about my daughter mainly, but they're like miscellany that will feature with the book. The first one is about what happens to you psychologically when you write, when you create. So this is why I chose it. It's sort of the moment after you've produced something that you think is creative, that is new, that is made some sort of inroad, the vulnerability you feel afterwards. You know, the trite metaphor is post-coitum triste. You know, you feel like this, you know, after, you know, sex, you feel kind of drained and whatever. But what it really is it's a vulnerability I feel. Sometimes the idea that you'll never get it back, that if you've succeeded once, it's the end, you know, you have this sort of thing. And anyway, I titled it A Teetering Place. Where do I go? Driven by this erring beast each time, with fathomless feet, my eyes somehow closed and somehow neat. Where do I go after the true and illicit feast? There is shrieking once more, and from the balcony, I hear the base spirits roar about this place, a teetering place by which I die, a dyer's die, and am filled with a drop of good and surreptitious grace. A mere dreg or pellet can be the sum of that flowing water we then become, fast, slow, the speed of a stranger's wonderland, always already unknown. Where do I go? Riven by a hounding pack of hounds, in a hirsute bacchanal, while this turning Saturn's sound stays, but as a muffled sound. I don't know where I go, by this music somehow found inside of me. I pressure the dark below the surface and find this slow, calm oar come to adorn the vehicle of something more. This is one much more directly psychological, and I think it bears on the Varro paintings in a way, although I don't know Varro to be honest, but I just noticed something, a similarity, that this poem is like a retelling of the Kafka short story, A Hunger Artist. And it's in my view, I've taught it many times and I've thought about it much, and I love Kafka. And I think this story is very much about the imperfection of the artist, which is the source of his being an artist or her being an artist. And it's just a retelling of that story, that little parable story he has. And I think in the story, the character, the hunger artist, who's looking for spiritual nourishment, you know, given the vehicle of physical nourishment, is never satisfied, is obsessive, perhaps intuitive, like Kafka was, and is his own worst enemy, basically. But it's the fruit that comes from that tension that creates that makes him an artist, even if one who's dying, even who's seen tragically. So, a hunger artist. All day long, he is hungry. The nourishment that he hopes for is so large in the distance and possessed of such long and whittled legs, whittling and whittling. It makes him angry. The righteous and the free should not be caged like this, caged and made to pay this toll, this tax, this fee. As he views the wrongs, he pays himself, as though a note on a passing stave about this music. Sorry, as he views the wrongs, he pays himself, the storms of his gift, the stress. He wonders, as though a note on a passing stave about this music, this beat, these feet. He raves and rants his sum of warning wisdoms, because he can't forgive the one man who placed him here. He can't forgive the way this drama of unwinding fear plays itself across the stage of his exhibits. The leers of the well-fed crowd, milling around, passing by, speak in tongues to him he can't quite parse or gloss. He's never quite understood what it is to be a man or woman like this, plain spoken, hanged hungry for the simple things whose utmost token is to be satisfied. The length and width of those fat fires needs slaked for all to see, as he does too, sadly. The stet-like finish they evince, this passing crowd, make him feel a stranger before an even stranger God. And as he kneels, offering up a doubtless waylaid prayer, chaser for the food at the last, that might prove sturdy and burly and good. He views again the weirdly filmic scene he's trapped within, this reel turning on repeat, burning like the infinite sin it always was and is. It was always easier for him to be hungrier than the rest, angrier, fearful, worried, unfree, because the food made to beat and sate his hunger named him always in ways he failed to like or love. So he wishes to stay weak like this, frail, farther from the stronger ways of a stronger body, which is safe in its safety, sure in its sureness, certain of the same old certainties an artist can never know, feeling all things as they bleed. Okay, the third one, a piece I wrote very quickly, but I like doing this in poetry, having dialogue, having a bit of a dramatic feel to it. So in the italics is more like a kind of a dialogue, and I always, when I do it, when I have that slightly dramatic narrative inkling, I tend to write more fluently. Actually, it kind of comes to me quite naturally, narrative, dramatic verse. So this is titled "Good Advice." If it's peace you want, the man said, be a bough, be a leaf, find their rooms and read in green breaths their green relief. If it's peace you seek in some final hall of columned grace, learn the better and learn the more mediocre mores, and face to face with a simple heart, with a simple mind, shear away, much like they do, the simple sin of a silken man being svelte in a plain world planed by what only the cloth wants. And the man never spoke his name, and the man was like a river running through me for many days after this. He seemed wise, building things, forming things from the inside to the inside. And it was like he'd no need of any place, and not a need for any name, nor a name to suit the face of a man I saw only once in my life. And it was a meeting that set the tone of all my cleverness from then on. The last one I'd like to read is for my wife, written on Valentine's of this just past month. This is probably the least kind of directly thematically psychological, although it does have elements of that, I hope anyway. It's a poem I wrote on Valentine's for my wife, and it's not unidirectional, it involves tension, but I hope it evinces a nice feeling, a nice sentiment at least. So Valentine's 2021 for Fatin. I want to break through a screen here, one we've built at deuce and locked inside a strangely flawless battle built of fear, and fear that's worse than that, a harder fear, a hardened one against the rocks. So this is what I want. To unshield the utmost truth, and with a sum of honest breaths, line my lines like likely minds while working hard to disarm them. My only weapon will be my honesty. In short, I want to land and pierce the broken ice of a twofold story once told twice. Between the two of us, tied, tethered by twofold travesties, two mouths, four lips, and all that hurts between, I hope to find the diamond inkling deeply hidden once again. Find the glint that gives the toil of scurrying, rummaging hands, hopes in fertile soils, or just the glimmer that proves itself, a risen character upon this stage, or like a cleansing spirit, swift to prove itself a peer to our daunting, peerless drama, and all the dirt we've looked for, two ravished victims busied with the search for a satisfying sort of failure. And so this is all I have to say as I mother words to another mother. And so this is what it is today. Another shot from undercover at being simple, so that love might wear again a lover. Thanks. How do I get out of this?
Thank you.
Thank you. How do I get, oh, stop share, yeah.
Yeah, just
Cool.
click on stop share. Thank you, Omar, for sharing your
Thank you.
wonderful poems.
Oh, I want to say one more thing, if I might.
Yes, go ahead.
Although in my book there's lowercase poems in the lowercase and free verse and so on, I often use uppercase, and it's something I realized a few months ago when I was having a chat with a friend, talking about Lacan, and I think this might sound outlandish, but you're all Jungian, so you've got the natural instinct for seeing things, signs for wonders, I suppose. You have that instinct in you. I think when I started off using uppercase letters, it was a way of lending myself authority. It's like a totem for lending myself authority. It makes it more formal, more official, and it was actually it's a kind of compensation in a way, for a feeling of lack, really. So yeah, just something I happened to have a conversation a few months ago, and it did occur to me that I tend to, even when I write in prose, I'm always dramatically authoritative when I might not be so myself, because I think I am trying to search for this authority. And when I look at it from a tritely Freudian point of view, it is, I think, because, you know, I wasn't castrated. Sorry to say that, but, you know, I wasn't castrated fully at the right age, if you're looking at it in that trite model. So I think a lot of the artist in me comes out of that lack of being, as it were, subordinated, you know, being more liberated, I suppose, in a way, comes from that. Anyway, we all have our problems, no worries. I'm sorry, just waxing lyrical there, sorry.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Omar. You've got a few comments for you in the chat box as well. So I'm going to leave okay, so now we have an open mic. And before we move with Sarah to the chat box comments and the discussion, Hedy expressed her want to share a poem with us during the open mic session. So we're going to start with Hedy, and then if anyone else would like to pitch in, then feel free to do so. Hedy?
Okay, well, thank you for dedicating this space for this poem. I hope it will tie in with some of the themes we've just heard. And I'll read a poem from The Taste of the Earth, which is my latest collection. The title is Weaving and Unweaving. I used to marvel at my mother's readiness to unravel a sweater or unstitch her needlepoint at the slightest error. Eyes fixed over colored wool or silk, sliding through needles, her racing fingers fiddled in silence, erasing long working hours. But why look at unweaving as erasure or as Penelope's endless fight against time? Isn't it rather a way to retrace one's steps? Each gesture an intimate journey into the weaver's memory? And isn't wisdom often equated with weaving and unweaving? I think of the backwards movement of the needle, unstitching every design, yarn by yarn, as one erases a word, letter by letter. Each stitch removed leaves an imprint on the fabric or loom, a gaping space like footsteps. The way the tip of a pencil scars paper fibers, its invisible indentations only revealed by a brush of charcoal dust. A careful erasure revisits the pattern. The image vanishes, not the roads that led to it, like a text whose lines haunt you as you discard them one by one. A constant wavering between remembering and forgetting, telling and retelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Hedy. That's a little complimentary, maybe with the first Vado painting, the one on embroidery, because stitching, weaving, embroidery. Thank you. It's beautiful. And I'd like to ask if anyone else would want to share a poem or a piece of art or anything else that's creative with the rest of us tonight. Sorry, today. Most of you are in the States. Glenda, yes. You're muted, Glenda. You're still muted. Oh.
Me.
Yeah.
Okay, now, right. Okay, I have a poem which I wrote recently, which is about weaving the strands of one's life together. So I'd like to read that if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay, it's called I Fear I Left It Too Late. My life has passed so far as if by magic, so much taken for granted, so much lost that I thought wrongly I could always count on. Life has passed like a dream, half forgotten on waking. It seemed important at the time, but now it's hard to recall what it was all about. I fear I have left it too late, more years behind me than ahead of me. So many friends and family passed on to where I can only imagine. I fear I have left it too late to write a memoir. I know I have forgotten more than I can remember of the life I have lived. Memory is a trickster at best. Poring over relics of the past, I travel back in time, seeing now what I couldn't see then, knowing what I didn't know. I am becoming someone else, no longer the hero of the story, just a witness looking back from afar, shifting perspective from figure to background. This is the compensating gift, seeing myself as just one thread in a larger tapestry, learning more about the lives of the people who touched and shaped mine. I pay loving homage to the dead and the living, reaching out to the survivors of my generation, now weaving together the strands of our lives, past and present. I am reaching back even further, marveling at secrets DNA exposes, tracing the lives of the generations from which I came as I gather their stories and their struggles. Surprising ancestors emerge from the shadows, Huguenots, Puritans, witches, lords and ladies, tailors and barrel makers, pirates and colonists. I can see how I carry in me blood and hopes of so many. Their lives, their joys and tragedies, I reclaim as my own. And I know it is not too late to weave the story. That's it.
Thank you. That's a wonderful poem. I like how you said memory is a trickster at best. Thank you, Glenda, for sharing. And who else would like to go next? Nobody? Claude, yes. Professor Claude Barbary.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Good to see everyone. I'll just share the screen. Hold on one second.
Take your time.
One second.
Yeah, take your time.
Everyone see that?
We can see it.
Okay, this is a poem. I was thinking about the color green and in the natural world. This is a poem from years ago when I lived in Tennessee. There was a place that was a charge space for me in the back country. It was a waterfall that you had to hike about 3 miles in to arrive to a large kind of cathedral of a waterfall. It was called Deer Lick Falls. Polaris rides condescence into coal and kindled sky, the smolder where it lies, and banks against the Appalachian South. It's tender, quick to catch in memory. The mountain coves and rills of Tennessee, their tapered watersheds and winding becks that followed lead to coals no turning back will find again among the yellow birch in terraces of oak and tamarack. To stand there now is to return and dream, where amber colonnades of maples blend into the tapestry of cliff and spruce, like Chinese literati scrolled on silk, their heavens trailed into emptiness. And wake to hear the summer tanagers bequeath to trillium their songs of pine, their storied octaves fluted into weirs of toppled beach, the creeks will overbrim, and aspens felled to beaver ponds upstream. Now clamber down the pin-tucked trails the deer have berry browsed through flame azaleas. The compline quietus diffused for miles, until the salts of distant thunder spill with rising tympany into your flume, your falling echo draped to answer stone. And there remember solitude that shared a simple company with concurrence, the sun that speckled darters into trout, the fire salamanders kissed by snails with occidental names the locals give, Ocoee, dwarf, the shovel nose and patch, who shed their tails whenever preyed upon, the basilic of snakes that castanite with canebrake rattles in the bee balm tear, the bard and saw wet owls with saucer eyes, their stares like asphodels of underworlds. And once the grace epiphany of luck, when near your prismal plume a red fox leapt, his torch of winter fur erubescent as leaves the autumn sourwood array, and traced his meteoric vanishing into imaginaries of reprise. Unto these once astoundments, let us call with falling river sound unsourced by time, and summon as the whippoorwill begin their veil inflections narrated in vines, incessant gramercy that given takes into the wild incarnate quiddities of loneliness, a held refrain of peace. And know again the searing cry of hawk above the rocky orioles that rise to drift into the precipice of clouds, as though 10,000 centuries will pass by next year's rain and last but for a breath. Remember what was seen is ever shown.
Thank you, Claude. You have a very special eye for nature, a very beautiful poetic eye for everything in the natural world. And it seems like there's some synchronicity today with the color green.
You also have a wonderful gift for cadence and line. I mean, it's just beautiful. Anyway,
thank you. One of my friends called it my tentered abbey.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us today.
You bet.
And I guess we still have 15 minutes for the Q&A. So Sarah, would you like to take over the chat box and read some of the questions and maybe comments that are there? Sure. If anyone prefers to use the microphone, then please do so. You could just press the raise hand button so we could see you more clearly, and then you could use the mic.
So starting at the beginning of the chat, I know there were some questions about Dennis's book titles, and he's put those in there. Alchemy, Jung, and Remedios Varro, Cultural Complexes and the Redemptive Power of the Abjected Feminine. And it's coming out from Routledge, May 4th, 2021. There was also a question about the little bird in the dress near her feet, and I think Dennis has answered that in the chat as well. He's far ahead, but did you want to say anything more about it, Dennis? you're
Oh, you're
muted
muted,
still.
Dennis. Yeah.
Jung also wrote about birds. I think Varro knew and studied Jungian psychology, and I think that and she loved birds. Interestingly enough, she loved both birds and cats. So birds are connected with the cats who kind of prey on birds, but I think for Varro, birds are often images of imagination and release. That would be my guess anyway.
Well, thank you. And there's he's written a comment on that in the chat as well. And scrolling through here. A lot of lovely comments for everyone sharing. I myself was really struck by how many of these just seem to weave together. The themes and images that really called. I know when I was trying to decide what to share, I was a little torn, and then hearing Dennis and Rebecca's presentation and the image of the beheading, I thought, oh well, I'll go ahead with mine, because that's that will connect in. And then there were so many others that connected.
Also, can I say one thing to Sarah, please?
Sure.
You talked about your dream. I mean, I this is one of the things that makes me think Jung was right. When I was 11 or 12, I had a fever, like a serious fever, delirium, and I had this very impactful dream, which I remember to this day. And I remembered it all my life. I've remembered it. It was a very intense, delirious dream, waves of black and white flowing into each other. And I've got a feeling, I mean, I guess obviously, that it was an archetypal dream because that was a stage at the beginning of pubescence, probably some sort of stage. And I think one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the best and most enlightening things about Jung versus Freud is that he does believe that there are many transformational stages in life, that it's not all linear from the first 5 or 6 years or what have you. And also, I mean, I think if that is true, it could have been an image of what would happen to me later when I was 18, 19, when I had a psychotic break. If that model, the Jungian model, is true, that your whole life is in a way kind of more resumed in a more circular pattern than just a linear pattern, then that makes a lot more sense to me. Sorry, I just want to mention because you talked about your recurring dream, and it occurred to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, that in my work with dreams, I found that very often, that I'll have a dream, but then years later it will come back to me with a whole new gift of wisdom for the new stage in my life. But those images remain so potent.
Yeah, I think, I mean, more or less, one way or the other, I think we can all relate to that as well. And dreams have often been, associated with prophetic properties as well. So it could tell you what's going to happen with you, or it kind of tells you what you know is going to happen with you, or who you're going to be transforming into.
Or the hell you're about to go through 10 years later, but anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a comment from Sharon to Carole. She said that reading was so potent, it would be lovely to read it again, so all the beauty of it can sink in. Would you be willing to share the text?
Oh, definitely. And I'm sorry I didn't share my screen, and I probably should have, because it was so long, but I'll be glad to share the text, definitely. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a beautiful poem, Carole, and there are more comments here. Thank you for the stimulating thoughts and fantastic, really interesting. As to the comments during mine, there's one from Glinda. The Green Man is a legendary being who symbolizes rebirth, a vegetation deity as life reemerges in spring. And the Green Man was very much in my mind. When I looked up images of the Green Knight, a lot of them are akin to the Green Man. And it's a mythological being that I've studied for a long time. I mean, not really studied, but sort of cultivated relationship with off and on. And Dennis offered also a wonderful short story related to the Green Man, The Green Word by Jeffrey Ford, found in The Green Man, Tales from the Mythic Forest. And let's see. So yes, love the musicality of these beautiful poems, Omar, Hetty says. And in reference to one of the poems of Omar is an interesting repetition of green in this poem, which I noticed as well. And Dennis says, it's like we're rebirthing something through the mingling and sharing of our images, which I think is
Right. Mm-hmm.
definitely something I felt as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Hetty says, Dennis and Rebecca, I look forward to reading your book. And then Omar, Sharon asks, are your poems collected in a book form? So deeply moving within my soul.
Thank you, Sharon. The poems I read today are coming out, I think, with a contract for early 2022. It's a book called Morning Lit, Portals After Aliyah. So it's mainly about life with my child. I mean, life after and during my, the arrival of my child. But there are some other pieces which are kind of connected with it. I have other collections from before. And if any of you are interested in a Freudian title, my first book, 2010, with Cinnamon Press, is titled My Only Ever Oedipal Complaint. And there are loads of, parental, family, and I tend to write in general about personal relationships more than anything else. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, please do look me up. I have one book which is absolute rubbish. I mean it literally. I published it when I was going through a phase of losing perspective. So I don't want to even mention the title because it'll just make me go up in flames now. But some of my books, I mean, the thing with my books is, if I can be honest, is that I have some really good work in most of them, but there's also work which is just about passable as well. I've never had a book which I can sort of say, yes, that was something closed book, it's good, and I'm hoping for this next book in 2022 that I will have the discipline and the courage to excise every bit of crap there is there, and not be deluded into thinking some pieces are better than they are, so thanks for asking, Sharon.
All right, so and more on I know the theme of all of these weaving together. Carole says, thank you, Hetty. This poem reminds me of Jory Graham's Raveling. And let's see. So then the more recent ones, Pierre, it is not a question, again, just a remark about the symbolic of green. I write about this color because near of here we had a Fraternité du Loup Vert, or vert finally equals green, which is a kind of werewolf cult for real. In French reception of the Arthurian myth, the Green Knight is both a ver and were, and the symbology is connected to a lot of other
from this language confusion, green is there.
There we go.
By the way, Sarah, there's a book by
Kazuo.
Yeah. There's a book by Kazuo Ishiguro from a few years ago called The Buried Giant. Maybe you know it. The Green Knight plays a role there, and it's a wonderful book for all of you. I think if you haven't read it, all of you, I think, as people interested in the unconscious and memory and so on, it's a wonderful, wonderful novel. The Buried Giant. If anyone's interested in looking it up, I loved it. So and there's this appearance of this legend. Anyway, sorry.
Pierre, maybe you would like to use the mic. Maybe it would be clearer, if that's okay with you.
Yes, I can try.
Okay.
I'm in my kitchen in the same time. So yes. The fact is, I studied the myth of the Green Knight, and in French, the Green Knight is le Chevalier Vert, and this vert is green in French, but with the translation, we capture all different elements of mythology and symbolic. For example, vert is the same thing in the ears than the wear of werewolf. And so we have a true, yes, a true, we add. They finished at the beginning of the century, but we had a true fraternity of green wolves, which was werewolf community, which was connected with a cult of savage men. And the savage man is the other green man, the one of the rebirth of spring and so on. And so the connection was made strangely with a kind of werewolf cult. And so the two figure, Green Knight, Green Man, make a kind of bridge through a strange and totally not totally phonetical interpretation, because in fact green and vert is not etymologically connected, but phonetically it can make a bridge. It was the sense of my remark.
Interesting.
That's really interesting.
Oh, thank you, Pierre. Pierre is joining us today from France.
Yes.
Yep.
From my kitchen, France.
From your kitchen. Great. Thanks for joining, Pierre. Yeah.
So
Next.
there are just a few more comments. Omar, Rebecca says, found your deep poem to your wife very psychological and very much what we work to help couples do in therapy. Thank you for your poetic honesty.
Thank you.
And Glinda says, in response to another comment, Roberta, my poem was written as part of a group tribute to the Irish poet Paula Meehan. It has been recorded and will be broadcast by Beltane Poets on the 20th of May. I don't know how to put it up here, so we'll have to figure out how to get that out.
Okay, so there's no link, Glenda? No, okay. Maybe you can share it on Facebook, on the Psychreative Facebook group, whenever the link is available. Or the recording.
I can't until it's republished at the recording, because Facebook considers it as publication. You consider it own your work if you put it up there.
Right.
But I arranged to email it to Roberta, and I'll email it to anybody who wants it. But I'll put up a reminder on my Facebook page for the reading on the 20th of May. The group of poets is quite remarkable. There's about a dozen of us. We're all older poets, and part of a special celebration called Belchina for older artists. It happens May every year in Ireland.
That's nice. And that's it, right? Does anyone else have a comment or a question? Or would anyone like to share one more thing before we close the session? No?
Rula, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Should I share my file of my text of that poem here in the chat?
Sure. Yeah, you can. You can
or email it to you. I'm not sure which would work better.
You can do both, just in case anyone misses it.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe you can try here first, and then.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully we'll meet again next month. And again, the date has not been decided yet, but it should be sometime around maybe the 8th of May or the 15th of May. So it's either that Saturday or the other. If you haven't joined our Facebook group yet, please feel free to do so. And You can share any of your work there. You could announce any other creative activities or workshops that you are performing in or directing. Again, feel free to ask for book reviews or anything of that sort, anything with an artistic collaboration. Let it be like a shared space for all of us as well between our Psychreative sessions. I would actually like to ask if anyone is interested in writing a review for my poetry book, Simply Being. So I would welcome reviews for that. If you would prefer reviewing something more Jungian on creativity, then my book, Jungian Metaphor and Modernist Literature, just let me know, and I will ask Alexis or any of the other editors from Routledge Psychology to send you a review copy. So thank you all again for being here. And again, if there's anything you'd like to say about your work or any invitations to any other creative activities, let us know. We've got a few comments here I can see. All right. Oh, okay. Yes, Carol. Yeah, I think it's downloadable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something's happening with my laptop, so that means it's downloaded. Okay, thank you so much for sharing it with us. Do you have a collection of poetry? Any poetry book that you would also like to
for me?
share?
For me,
Yeah.
I have one that it's called Breaking Open in Place, and it's now being considered. It's a collection of almost 100 pages actually, and I may end up breaking it into 3. But yeah, it's finally I'm getting there. I've just had one Pushcart Prize nomination, and some of my poems won a competition with Seventh Quarry rather in Wales. So yeah, it's been kind of slow, a bit of a late bloomer here, but yeah, I hope to have some work out there. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing it with us. And we hope to see you all again next month. Please spread the word and let everybody know about Psychreative. And if you would like to participate as presenters in future sessions, email me or Sarah, or just send an inbox on Facebook and give us a shout, and we will put your name down. So thank you all again, and see you very soon. Good night.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Wonderful to be with you all.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.